really, when again, I can't stop thinking about you and your name, because when you say cloud therapist, is brilliant. Because because sometimes I really feel that as a consultant, I'm basically a therapist.
You are a therapist, yeah. I feel the same.
Yeah.
So GP, the next kind of part of the book that I wanted to really talk to you about was the cloud adoption paradox. What is the paradox?
Okay. The thing is that strange that we're witnessing in the IT world is that the small companies that should adopt the cloud, they shouldn't. They are not doing it because they could save money. And instead, large enterprises should adopt shouldn't adopt the cloud to some extent in some circumstances. They are doing a full into the cloud. There is I created this chart in the book, which is about the cloud paradox, that is based on the Forbes data that's been released, and this is about the real cloud adoption from Forbes versus what I reckon should be the cloud adoption. So, for example, the small and medium businesses are basically ignoring the cloud. They are still thinking that they want their own hardware under the desk, while, for example, the government, or on the opposite hand, they are doing an all-in to the cloud and basically not having anything inside, which is also bad as well.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, the chart is certainly, I think, interesting in regards to. But why do you think kind of SMBs are or small to medium business sort of companies are actually ignoring the cloud?
I think there's something like they still want to have kind of control to their own stuff, while they shouldn't. Let's say
I mean, would you say it's like a lack of vision in terms of kind of what they, how they want to use technology?
Yeah, lack of vision, but also I would say lack of trust and a lack of knowledge on the subject, because many small companies and medium companies, I'm talking about Europe here, okay?
Yeah, sure.
Mainly when I go to Germany or when I go to other countries in Europe, they still think that they want to see the object. So many of these companies are owned by somebody, so it's not really a limited company with many shareholders. It's just one man band, and they will still want to see, oh, this is my server.
Right.
Okay. Well, there is actually no need for that any longer, and maybe, and I'm talking about a friend of mine who went to a small manufacturing company in Italy, and he sent me a video, and had this big old system with 2 failed disks.
Yeah.
I said, look to the owner of a company, you're going to lose my data. Oh, okay, we'll take it, whatever. And then eventually it broke, and then they lost everything. They lost many days, while they can shift and lift everything to the cloud, and that's it,
Yeah.
There's no point. I mean, why having a piece, sorry about, I'm going to be rude. So you're going to have a piece of crap in your own company while you have good lines, really good internet lines, and you can move everything to data center, and that's it.
Sure. So yeah, so it's kind of that kind of perception of sort of having tangible assets that you can sort of touch and feel. Okay, and obviously enterprises kind of are large, enterprises are adopting it, but they're adopting it without thinking. I think is one of the other things that you mentioned in the book, and not kind of adopting it correctly. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of doing all in to the cloud. There's kind of many reasons for that. One is a psychological one, because they kind of shifting responsibility to the cloud provider.
Mm.
The other one is that many of them are stuck into the internal processes. Let's say, for example, to purchase an hardware to some big companies in Germany, they could take up to 1 year to have a server, or maybe they need now. Is so much easier to swipe a card, a credit card, and have the thing you need now.
And off you go. Yeah.
Yeah, but unfortunately, that the other side of is that you quickly lose control, because it's so easy to have a new machine. Okay, then you forget about it.
Yeah.
And then you spin up new machines, and then you lose control over your cloud.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, from my experience of data center, is I often sort of phoned the customer and said one of the prerequisites is to have your virtual machine, or even physical server for that matter, up and running before I actually come in and install the software or whatever I was going to do. And that was actually something I'd try to preempt by calling them weeks ahead, so to give them plenty of time to make the requisition and whatever notices they needed to do to actually to make that happen for me. Okay, so lack of control also seems to be kind of visible in governance and migration. And I think this is kind of something that you touch on. Again, sort of governance certainly being a very important sort of aspect, where you're really kind of stepping back and looking at all the controls that you're putting in place. And talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the thing is that, again, if your things get into that spiral of creating new machines and everything without any control at all, of course you get lost. You don't know what's there. You don't govern anymore your own cloud. So you have to be adopting the cloud in the proper way to be able to govern the cloud. But also, again, especially I'm talking to some cloud providers, you can create multiple cloud inside your own cloud. So the cloud is a billing entity, and you can create several departments with they call it transit zones. So you can say, okay, this portion of your cloud is for you, marketing, do whatever you want, as long as you adopt our governance and our script or whatever, and you follow our rules, and then it can be an effective way of not losing control of the cloud.
Sure. Okay. So let's. I think one of the examples that you give is kind of a government example where there's a mission critical infrastructure running, and that's a customer example for a European national critical infrastructure entity. I won't mention any names, but kind of just talk a little bit about what was that example about.
Yeah, of course I can't use the name here, but let me tell you, it's a really critical one. And the thing is that in this kind of example, you really don't want to adopt a cloud. I mean, there are some specific cases like this one, okay, that might affect an entire country. It has to be inside the country and under control. Because again, you have to use the cloud when it doesn't make sense to do so. But especially if we are talking about something like it could potentially shut down an entire country, then you might want to have your own data center and your own internal cloud. I'm not talking about not using a cloud. Is that you should use an internal cloud to do that.
Yeah, sure. And also the other one I think that you gave as an example in the book is a kind of a worst case scenario where there's like a conflict zone, for example. So lines will be cut off. How can you kind of, cope with that if let's say your workloads are in one particular region or part of the world, and then you're kind of, but that's kind of an enemy territory now or something.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of safe, especially in the EU or Europe in general as a continent, because we are kind of in peace each other, even if there are some political problems, let's say this way.
Relative peace.
But it could be some scenarios where there could be frictions between nations, especially we're talking Middle East or Far East countries, and then you're especially if you're government, you might not want to rely on a third party to provide those services,
Mm.
or a country that you don't know and you don't have relationship with. Let's say, for example, China. Okay, sorry to say that, but even Amazon in China is not Amazon. It's actually a subsidiary of the Chinese government with the Amazon software. So what if, for example, you put something there and you rely on your business in your data center in China, and tomorrow they decide to say, you know why? We're having a meeting, let's say something simple. We have a global meeting, so we shut down the internet for 4 days, which is not a scenario that cannot happen, because it did happen, okay? And what do you do in that case? You know, you have to carefully think about what you want to do, where you want to place your stuff, and everything else.
Sure. Okay. Yes. I mean, certainly, I think a lot of food for thought there in terms of, you know, kind of the adoption itself, why certain organizations are not doing that, others are, but they're not really thinking about it very well. You know, different scenarios that you mentioned, I think, in the book about sort of governance, you know, kind of having mission critical sort of, you know, scenarios where there is potential cutoffs or things get cut off. I think we've seen a lot of, you know, downtime situations as well happen, you know, even with the sort of the public cloud providers. So certainly a kind of a strategy around that and encompassing that with governance is probably sort of a good approach. And also it actually means that you know, ought to be taking advantage of some of the flexibility of the cloud, right? I mean, there's a lot of different things that you can do with it, like, you know, spot instances, for example, where, you know, certain regions are cheaper than others. It kind of makes sense to, you know, to do some workloads in there and use those workloads or upload those workloads or provision those workloads, I should say, in that region, kind of do what you need to do and then sort of, you know, tear that down afterwards. And again, it harks back to one of your 6 pillars in terms of automation.
Yeah, I mean, if you do things in the proper way, you can actually kind of decide dynamically where you want to put your workloads. And to some extent, to be honest, some companies do that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, they do that. They decide, let's say, I want a front end in Spain because it's cheaper now, and tomorrow I want to move my front end elsewhere, and you can do it actually.
Okay, GP, so let's move on to your chapter 11 of the book, which is talking a little bit more about transforming the IT culture. So one of the things that you mentioned there is shadow IT. So can you kind of expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, it's pretty common among, especially among enterprises, so big companies. The problem I see in big companies is that usually the IT is so full of projects, it's so complicated that there are so many policies that, you know what, it takes months to deliver a simple project, even, you know, even a simple web server, you know. And most of the time, I guess, you know, people inside the company said, you know what, I open an account on AWS or Google or wherever, and I run my own projects. That's absolutely common nowadays in companies, and this is actually quite unpleasant on both sides. I mean, the IT is so struck and so full they cannot deliver, so it's not really business friendly. On the other side, people got frustrated, create their own infrastructure on easily on the cloud by swiping their credit card, but there is no control. So there is no central policies. There are no guidelines. So each one do whatever they want with probably with third parties, and it's pretty common in marketing, for example. Okay, they probably have to launch a campaign for next week, and you know what? IT said, okay, we can do this maybe in 3 or 4 months' time.
Sure.
Oh, I have to go live in next week.
Right. So that's kind of a pretty much a sort of a standard definition of kind of shadow IT. But you also kind of talk about the dilemma of how sort of IT teams can kind of retain their power, but also at the same time kind of empowering their users and clients.
Right. The thing is that if they continue this way, they're not going to end up nowhere, basically. So in my experience, the IT department and also the IT manager should shift the approach. The thing is that projects are more and more day by day, you know, and there's no way out of this. So you can't scale that much anyway. So the only way around is that the IT manager and the IT department shift to more than a day by day to a governance model. So they create kind of policy guidelines, maybe scripts as well, you know, something like if you want to deploy a new VM, this is how you should do it, okay? This is how you should connect the VM to the central authentication system. This is how you should protect it, okay? In this way, you offload the IT department and empower every single department to choose their own way of doing things, but under the control of the central IT system.
Okay.
I know this is a big shift, but actually it works. I tried it in a couple of customers, one of which is in my book, and it does make the difference because you cannot scale that much.
Okay, so yes, there's kind of all these sort of dilemmas of, you know, of that kind of empowerment of your sort of users and clients, the kind of democratization of the technology, devolution of devolution of power, but still sort of retaining some kind of centralized governance, if you like. And I think that's kind of the certainly that theme I picked up in the book, you know, when it comes to so the challenges that IT teams basically have. So we also talk about kind of, you know, having a plethora of ways of doing the same thing, different methodologies, but you know, those kind of shouldn't be implemented just for the sake of it. Just kind of just expand a little bit on what you meant there.
Yeah, I've witnessed a lot of something like, let's go for a Scrum methodology or Agile methodology, which in a way it does make sense. Okay, but depends if it does make sense for you. Okay, for you as a customer, because probably, you know, having a sprint every morning for your business is not really effective. I mean, it really every best practice, every working methodology has to be actually declined and adapted to the actual business and to the actual company. Just don't take it like, you know, something like a fashion way of doing things, because it really don't work. And sometimes it's like basically overkilling your work sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly had examples where I've had to do 2 stand-ups a day, and you kind of do one in the morning and you do one in the afternoon or evening, towards the end of the working day, and then you kind of going, well, not a great deal has really moved on since the last time we talked. So it's kind of
exactly.
you know, bereft of any sort of details of in terms of the update. But yeah, okay. And also you talk about kind of the business agility a little bit as well, and kind of, you know, sort of trying to understand. Talk a little bit about that. What is that? What did you kind of mean by that?
Again, it's the fact that you have to respond quickly to the needs of the business. I mean, I did the example of marketing before. You know, like tomorrow, like literally tomorrow, you have to run a campaign. So, okay, maybe tomorrow is too early, but you have to be ready for it. Okay, and in a global economy, it doesn't work like 50 years ago where you have months to deliver a product or whatever. Now it's something like, I want everything now globally. So yeah, you can't have, you know, I can recall the ITIL, I believe the ITIL methodology. IT companies, IT departments are still using that methodology, and it doesn't work anymore nowadays. You know, you have to deliver now, and you need to wait to find your own way to do that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly speed is kind of the essence these days. And when you have competition as well, or you need to react to market forces, you know, such as the kind of the pandemic and things like that, I think that's definitely a very important factor.
Yeah, let's say recently we witnessed log4j as a vulnerability, and I've seen companies says, okay, we will patch in 6 months. Really? Like,
well, the hackers are not going to wait that long.
Exactly. And what this is actually what happened in between the New Year's Eve.
Right.
So they said, okay, we will leave it there. Exactly. New Year's Eve was a total disaster, believe me. Something like a lot of companies have been hacked for that.
Yeah.
And that's one of the issue. The other issue, for example, which is actually really about business agility. I'm still consulting for a betting firm. Well, actually develop a software for betting firms. Okay. And they took something like 3 months or 4 months to deliver a new release. And to deliver, I'm not saying developing, I'm saying installing a new release. I mean, what? Okay.
Wow.
I mean, this is kind of the paradox of business. Wrong example of business agility.
Sure. And also, I mean, obviously, the kind of the cultural change, is always in this kind of space. People, process, and technology is always kind of mentioned. But obviously, in terms of how you develop applications and the thinking around that will also need to change. I think you touch on that a little bit in the book.
Yeah. Again, to be able to adapt to the new challenges, you have to automate as much as possible, not only on infrastructure, but on development as well. And you need to have a CI/CD in place, for example, because I've seen, again, in this last customer of the betting software, they building in their own machines, okay, and then copy a jar file into the production machine. But this is not repeatable, okay? If you, especially if like them, you want to have a product, the process has to be repeatable. And this is all comes also handy if you want to have a disaster recovery mechanism. I guess we mentioned that before. If you have everything in place, if you have everything automated, then the DR or releasing for another customer is a piece of cake. But again, you have to wait to change the way things are developed. You have to change the way you interact with your colleagues on a development side, and a lot of things has to change.
Thank you very much for watching this talk. If you enjoyed the content, please comment, share, like, and subscribe to support the channel. See you next time.